Hey all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Julie and I primarily make content surrounding topics such as music, makeup, as well as mental health. Today's video is mental health related and I feel it's a very important one. I didn't want to just read you this dorky PowerPoint I put together and instead wanted to show it to you and read off of it so that you could see it for yourself and get a better understanding of this topic. So for today's video, we are specifically going to be talking about African Americans' experiences with mental health care, although we will focus somewhat on suggestions for improving these treatment barriers with marginalized populations and minorities in general. There are specific mental health concerns for African Americans. The Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health reports that African Americans are 20% more likely to endure serious mental health issues in comparison to the general population. Also, African American youth who witness violence have a greater risk of developing PTSD at over 25% of that greater risk. African Americans also are more often involved in traumatic, stressful situations that can lead to mental health conditions, such as homelessness as well as exposure to violence. I also want to add socioeconomic stressors there. Now that we're aware of some of the specific mental health concerns within this population, we're going to delve into treatment barriers that African Americans face. African Americans are overrepresented in both jail as well as prison populations. They comprise 60% of prison populations and 37% of drug arrests. Less than 2% of the American Psychological Association members are African American. This poses a concern that mental health providers are not culturally competent enough to treat this population. And this is a valid concern, as many African Americans have reported enduring racism and microaggressions from their mental health providers. If you don't know what microaggressions are, an example of a microaggression would be when a white woman clutches her purse as an African American individual is about to pass by her. Research has pointed to a major lack of cultural competence in mental health care. This is extremely concerning, as this often leads to misdiagnosis as well as ineffective treatment for marginalized populations. Misdiagnosis is such a common experience for this population that it has led to many individuals not trusting mental health providers. This leads to a smaller likelihood of African Americans receiving or sticking to mental health treatment. Socioeconomic barriers also play a role. 11% of African Americans did not have health insurance in 2017, according to collected survey data. African Americans, especially women, commonly report physical symptoms that appear to be related to a mental health condition. This is classified as experiencing somatic symptoms, that being physical symptoms that cannot medically be explained, so it's proposed that they may be due to a mental health condition. This tends to often go unaddressed by mental health providers who are not culturally competent enough to understand that different populations experience mental health symptoms in a variety of ways. African American men are likely to be misdiagnosed with schizophrenia when describing their symptoms that would more likely pertain to a mood disorder or PTSD. Religion, spirituality, and community. These aspects are often wonderful supports for African Americans. However, research has found that they are more likely to rely on these supports than mental health providers, even when mental health treatment could be essential to their recovery. Supports outside of mental health treatment are crucial for all individuals, but a mix of these supports as well as mental health treatment yields the best results. Now we're going to get into specifically how to address these proposed treatment barriers. One suggestion that I 100% stand behind, which is why I don't have any sources here, this is all me, is to improve the cultural competence of all mental health providers. This can be done through continuing education courses. So those are courses that licensed therapists have to take to renew their license, and I definitely would suggest that all therapists should continue to take courses in cultural competence, even if it was in their education previously. I also argue that it can be done with undergraduate and graduate education courses required to become a mental health provider, and this could be incorporated into all different areas for social workers, therapists, psychologists, as well as psychiatrists. I also encourage providers to do their own research to improve and expand upon their cultural competence. Now that I've thrown around this fancy term, cultural competence, I wanted to briefly define what it is. So let's start with culture. Culture is defined as an individual's beliefs, norms, values, and language that are all crucial aspects to their lives, and mental health is no exception to that. Cultural competence has to do with a clinician's ability to comprehend the role culture, both their own, both the clinician's and the client's culture, plays, what role that plays within the client's mental health treatment. Here's some suggestions I found in my research on how to find the right provider if you are an African American or from another marginalized population. Start with seeing a primary care physician if you're not yet comfortable with seeing a mental health provider. These doctors typically have enough of a background to determine if you may have a mental health condition that could benefit from treatment. They then can refer you to a mental health provider that hopefully will meet your treatment needs. Here are some questions that NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, proposed you could ask your new mental health provider to assess the cultural sensitivity or competence of this specific provider. One question is, have you treated other African Americans? And this is important because this is a specialization that they should have. Every therapist should have experience working with different populations, but it's important they have this background. Next up, we have you had training in cultural competence or on African American mental health? Absolutely. How do you perceive our cultural backgrounds could influence our communication as well as my treatment? And finally, how will you include my beliefs and personal practices of my culture in treatment? That one is especially important with culturally competent practice in therapy because although aspects such as religion and spirituality are separate supports, they should 100% be respected and incorporated into the counseling process for individuals who hold those beliefs because that is so important to who they are as a person, as well as how to make a treatment plan and set goals for their recovery. What else can you share with a mental health provider that could help? It's suggested to share your personal beliefs, values, as well as any cultural characteristics you feel will help the provider to understand your identity and culture. For example, some African American individuals may want family to be a major part of their treatment. Requesting this ahead of time or seeking out a therapist who specifically does family therapy could be helpful. Now let's get into multicultural counseling because this goes along with being culturally competent. The definition of multicultural counseling, specifically in regard to the psychology field, is a therapeutic process that utilizes treatment approaches and unique therapeutic goals that align with the lived experiences, cultural contexts, and values of clients from diverse backgrounds. It's suggested when you are beginning therapy with marginalized populations. So this is the intake. This is the very first appointment, and these are the suggestions. Therapy for these populations should always begin with addressing any experiences the individual has faced regarding discrimination or marginalization. This shows the client that therapeutic space is a safe space for them to discuss these experiences. And this is going to strengthen the therapeutic relationship, which is essential to every client's recovery, well-being, progress, etc. I did want to talk a little bit about CBT. I remember a while ago someone told me CBT was racist, and honestly, I'm not as well educated as I should be, and I didn't know where that came from. So I did a bit of research on that today about how to remedy that process. The reason being is that the nature of CBT doesn't initially recognize cultural differences, but there are ways to even tailor CBT to be culturally competent for your clients. So if you haven't heard of CBT before, CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. It's an evidence-based treatment for many mental health conditions. However, as I said, it's come under scrutiny for failing to acknowledge various cultural implications, but it can be modified so that it is more culturally competent. Cognitive restructuring is a major component of CBT. For example, CBT mainly focuses on the irrational or inflexible thought patterns experienced by clients. So cognitive restructuring has to do with acknowledging the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors involved in this process and changing these thoughts to something more neutral, rational, or realistic in hopes to reduce the severity of the painful emotions. Clients from marginalized groups tend to experience negative and automatic thoughts. However, it is crucial to recognize that these thoughts do not always have an irrational basis if these individuals have personally experienced any form of discrimination or marginalization. Therefore, it is unacceptable to question the validity of potential racism occurring for clients if this is a major concern for them. Not only is this invalidating, but it's considered to be a microaggression. This will even negatively affect treatment outcomes as well as the therapeutic relationship. When clients discuss lived experiences of racism, therapists should do a few things. First, they need to validate the experiences and encourage clients to discuss these experiences openly. Next, they should validate the painful emotions that have occurred for the client due to these unfortunate and unacceptable experiences. Finally, they should acknowledge that we unfortunately do live in a world where these injustices occur and it isn't fair or deserved whatsoever. The therapist should utilize these experiences to help clients work toward improving their own self-esteem, confidence, as well as strengthening their identity. I also wanted to put in a cool example of culturally competent CBT. This is a cognitive restructuring exercise and a way to tailor CBT to be more culturally competent. So the client provided an example negative thought where they stated, "People will think I'm stupid because I am Black." Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to reframe this by looking at the evidence that racism might not be as likely as they think. That is a microaggression and it is not accurate. Instead, help the client to turn inward with reframing questions about themselves. The example that was provided here was, what evidence do you have that you are stupid? So this strayed away from these racist experiences that may have happened to the client and instead focused on this internal intrinsic belief that they're worried people will think they are stupid, perhaps because they believe they are. Client used this prompt to reframe their response that is still culturally sensitive and appropriate. They said, "Even though I sometimes feel stupid, I've always done well in school and know that I am a worthwhile and intelligent person." And I love that because the beginning of that statement is acknowledging the feeling and validating that sometimes I feel this way, but I have all this evidence that this is not the case. And they even said something nice about themselves at the end. This example shows how to validate the client's experiences of racism while helping them to challenge their negative automatic thoughts. This is a fancy term for thoughts that directly correlate to painful experiences we endure, and they can be a result of mental health conditions or other stressors. Feeling that we're stupid, having that belief is definitely a very common one, which is why I wanted to share it today. All right. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. It was really important for me to make this video during a very difficult time. I enjoyed doing the research for this and was happy to have the opportunity to be able to present this to you. I'm going to link as many resources as I can find for African American individuals regarding mental health down below. I hope this was helpful. Please leave a comment down below letting me know if there's anything else you know of out there that could be helpful that I did not mention today. I would also love to make other videos on this topic that could be helpful because it's especially important to talk about at the moment. Please give my video a like if you enjoyed it. It really helps the channel. I'd love for you to subscribe as well. You can follow my social medias. They'll be down here. My Instagram is Julie_counseling. My Twitter is Julie Counseling with no underscore. And my Facebook page will be linked down below as well. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye, guys.